This cold, wealthy formality followed by something fucked up.
Better than food, man.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Clifford Lee Sargent. Great to see you as always. Hope you're doing well. Get that coffee. For those of you who are new, this is a show dedicated to helping you find the greatest books you've ever read. And now, during lockdown, it would be the perfect time to read more. So, today is Thus Were Their Faces by Silvina Ocampo. This was a gift from a very kind patron of the show. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. It's also an NYRB, New York Review Books edition. They send me books occasionally. I love them. I guess that means I'm partially sponsored by them and legally required to say so. I have no idea. But I love their stuff, really. Silvina Ocampo was an Argentinian author, or Argentine author, I think there's some debate which is appropriate, who wrote short stories that have a strange cruelty to them. Surreal short stories with this odd cruelty. In 1979, she was denied Argentina's National Prize for Literature because the judges decided that her stories were demasiado crueles, too cruel. So when she and the editor of this book decided to put this collection of short stories together, Thus Were Their Faces, they chose the cruelest, right? As they should. What did they mean by cruel, though, right? This was the question that was like going through my head when I started reading this. It's like, what do you mean? Cruel in what way? Well, exactly what it sounds like, it turns out. Literally characters performing odd acts of cruelty or torture in some capacity. Not like Sod, but the characters experience some sort of cruel situation or witness some sort of act of cruelty or something is mentioned. It's weird, her preoccupation with that kind of thing, because of the surreal nature of the short stories. So those two things, the surreal nature of the stories and the acts of cruelty juxtaposed, really give her this style and atmosphere that is totally unique and totally her own. Yet it's not quite horror, right? But there's a real darkness to the writing of Silvina Ocampo, which is why it's partially why she's so good. The other part would be the writing itself. It is unbelievable. It's very adult. It's very mature and sophisticated. It's classy as fuck, basically. She nails it. This is the circle she's coming from. She's coming from this Argentinian circle of wealthy, elite authors, and her sister was a publisher of Sur magazine, you know, so it's like Julio Cortázar meets Flannery O'Connor, along with all the tropes of the famous Argentinian circle she was a part of. The other members being her close friend Jorge Luis Borges, basically one of the greatest authors ever, period, and her husband Adolfo Bioy Casares, author of The Invention of Morel, which is one of the greatest books I've ever read. If you want a complete mindfuck in an afternoon, it's very, very short, I suggest you read it. The Invention of Morel. I think I read that once, didn't get it the first time. It was like Pedro Páramo. I'm sensing a pattern. Some of these books you need to read twice. Second time I read that thing, or I don't even know if it was the second, but when I read it and I got it, it's astounding. Like, and he was in his 20s when he wrote that damn thing. And Pedro Páramo, same thing, different, you know, he's, Juan Rulfo is Mexican, but yeah, phenomenal. And Borges, right from the get-go, I was just floored by, you know, so I think that's the book, that's the very first book I ever reviewed on Better Than Food, was a collection of the short fiction of Jorge Luis Borges, and it still is easily one of the greatest books I've ever read. It's not my favorite book, but it might be the greatest. In the preface to this collection, Borges calls her one of the greatest poets in the Spanish language. So with that stamp of approval, I mean, you couldn't, you know, but this was probably Silvina's biggest struggle as far as being recognized for her own talent. Though how much it pained her, I'm not sure. You know, she was kind of an introvert. She was more quiet than her sister, who was running Sur, the famous journal, hobnobbing with a shitload of famous people. I mean people like Stravinsky and Lawrence of Arabia and shit. I mean, like, it was, these were like the fucking who's who, right? But like not even celebrities, like the real who's who. Like the rich people in mansions in South America who who have connections worldwide and are like mysterious and amazing and interested in the occult. It's all very Polanski, I love it. But to have one unbelievably good author as your husband, and another as a close friend, and then your sister running the major literary journal Sur, well, I'm not sure what she thought. But after a few decades of having reviewers just compare and bring in all those characters, like it's just like inseparable from your work, I'd be like, all right, you know? Still, her association with them clearly influenced her writing. Maybe it wasn't a negative thing at all. Maybe it's just the story of a small group of people, a mysterious Argentine elite, who together created a body of work that is nothing short of absolutely astounding. And they actually did edit a book together, her, Casares, and Borges, I believe. Which is cool, you know, this collaboration. Also, really quick, if you're enjoying this, please hit the thumbs up. It helps get this video seen, and I think a lot of people could really use books like this during quarantine, so thank you very much. But if there is any question of whether she could hold her own on literary grounds, no hay duda. Her writing, her book, is much edgier than what I've read from the men. Silvina started as a visual artist, studying painting in Paris at one point. She didn't start her writing career until her 30s. But after that, she wrote a lot. Silvina's sister, Victoria Ocampo, was the famous publisher of the Argentinian journal Sur. She lived in this enormous mansion called the Villa Ocampo, where her guests included Stravinsky, Federico Garcia Lorca, and Albert Camus. You know, so like minor figures, right? Just little get-togethers. So Silvina was the one who sort of shunned the spotlight, but clearly had an enviable amount of talent. However, an article in the Paris Review written by Carmen Bujosa, the Mexican author whom I haven't read yet, said that perhaps nothing damaged Silvina's prestige more than the first review of her first book written by Victoria, in which the latter defines her stories as autobiographical and classes her narratives as awkward. Some weird sibling rivalry? Maybe. Nevertheless. Thus Were Their Faces is a collection of sophisticated Argentinian Gothic magical realism short stories. That's a poor description, I think, and reductive, because the Gothic quality is subtle, but present. It's only because it's difficult to describe, but I want to give you an idea of what it is, so take that with a big grain of salt. Broad strokes here. The themes of saints and sickness and witchcraft and madness pervade the narratives. Odd twists and turns and meta-literary devices a la Borges. There's clearly that influence present, but it's stranger. It's darker. It's darker than Borges. Much darker. Like this Guardian article I've linked to below says, unlike her contemporaries Bioy and Borges, whose fictions tended to operate in their own fantastical zones, deep in the past or in an alternate reality altogether, Ocampo creates recognizable domestic settings that she then infects with strangeness. In her world, a birthday party can become a funeral, objects collected in dreams can be brought into the waking world, and lovers flirt by exchanging stories of death. It's more violent and sexual than Borges, who was a little conservative and modest in his writing. He knew how to do certain things very, very well, and he stuck with them. Nothing wrong with that. However, Ocampo experiments. She steps outside, right? She's not afraid to write from the perspective of both genders, for one, if I'm not mistaken. Something I'm not sure the men ever did, or even attempted. So when I would start a short story in here, after a while, sometimes I wasn't sure if the perspective was a boy or a girl, and I believe that's intentional. You find out eventually, but it's not always so obvious. And Ocampo manipulates perspective to a degree that is unique and unsettling. Ocampo pushes the envelope more, for sure, in interesting, unusual ways. And there's the homage or repetition of Borgesian themes. Mirrors, yes. They're afraid of mirrors or reflected worlds or realities. I get it, but it's not too bad. It really comes off as an atmospheric reminder of the world Ocampo inhabited. Much more than an actual imitation of Borges, it's not. They're not overt, they're subtle and disturbing. Passionate, but cold. Cold passion, formal, then strange. This cold, wealthy formality followed by something fucked up. Witchcraft, dolls, sickness, ghosts, mirrors, childhood, madness, prophecy, and death. Also, these short stories span like 50 years, I think, right? From the 30s to the 80s. So I mean, that's a huge swath of a writer's existence. That's a fucking lifetime. And all the stories in this collection are taken from previously published collections, which they list in there. It says which stories are from which collection. So the styles of the stories change. Not dramatically, but significantly, I feel, you know, because that's a life. Some feel recognizable if you've read some of the other authors mentioned, like you know that kind of style, you know, the Argentinian surreal style. Others are like, I have no clue what you're doing here, but it's weird. What I mean is the stories have varying degrees of straightforwardness, right? Spoiler warning, kinda. By the time you're deep in these, you'll probably forget I said anything and be surprised anyways, so. The titular story concerns 40 children who all have the same face. Different haircuts, I think, and different like heights and stuff, and genders, but the same face. And they all turn out to be angels. That's not spoiling much, considering what happens. It's such a strange story that you have plenty left to discover. Another, called The House Made of Sugar, is sort of a supernatural story about a woman's personality taken over, usurped by the woman who previously lived in the house she resides in in a kind of Polanski's The Tenant manner. By the way, if anybody knows where to get a copy of Roland Topper's The Tenant for a reasonable price, I would love for you to get in touch with me, because I can't find that fucking book for a decent price anywhere. And I think I've been looking for, like, casually looking every now and then for years at this point. I can't get a copy. It's too rare. Another story is about a man who trains canaries, whose wife discovers that he has Indian origins from the culture that dips arrows in curare poison, you know. And he trains the canaries to stick small arrows in his friend, who is giving his wife suspiciously interested looks. Arrows dipped in this poison and blinds him. But then, out of guilt, I imagine, he has the canaries do the same to him. So neither of them can look at her any longer. So I enjoyed it. I thought it was great. I thought there were some really, really strange ideas. Her imagination is just incredible, enviable. I mean, really. Just reflecting now, I mean, you're almost not aware of it when you're reading them, but it's when you think about it later, you're like, that was fucked up. You're like, man, how the hell did she come up with that? I mean, like, one is about a hunchback clockmaker who attends this party where everybody's like acting like he's basically king of the world for a day, and then later on they like kill him or something. I mean, it's like, and the perspective, it's told from the perspective of like this 9-year-old who's getting drunk at the party and doesn't really see what the adults do to this guy in the end, but you get the feeling that it was really evil and cruel. So I loved exploring that world. So what did I not like about it? It's frequently set in the wealthy Argentine circles, so it can definitely feel a little prim and stuffy, a little too formal. You wonder if that's how she felt growing up and inhabiting these circles. Certain things get boring and drag after a while in the short stories. She's not particularly concerned with economy, but that's also something that article I mentioned by Buyosa discusses. We actually have before us long, complex stories that make no effort to be efficient or concise. Each one of them indulges excess, filled with subterranean literary implications. They gain impact by not seeking efficiency. They are tremendously powerful because they delight in excess unpretentiously, with a fresh air of spontaneity. Personally for me, some of it just loses me and it gets stale. It's fine if you want to inhabit that world for the length that the stories are, you know, the time it takes for you to read them. I don't. Some of them get, like, boring. But the ones that go, I mean, man, they go. Really. But hey, like I said, the first time I read Pedro Páramo, I didn't care for it at all. When I finally understood it, it's like the greatest book I've ever read. So it's likely me, not the stories. Worth a reread. Maybe two. Don't knock a novel or author until you're sure you've understood them. I break this rule all the time, but do as I say, not as I do. And there are lines in here, woven in the abstract fabric, that are haunted and haunting. I'm going to read you the beginning of my favorite short story in this collection called Magish. It was previously published in a collection called The Fury. A Thessalian witch read the future of Polycrates in the designs the surf made on its way down the beach. A Roman Vestal virgin read Caesar's future in a little pile of sand next to a plant. Cornelius Agrippa of Germany used a mirror to read his own future. Some present-day sorcerers read one's destiny in tea leaves, or in the dregs of coffee at the bottom of a cup. That can't be good. Some read it in trees, in rain, in ink blots or egg whites. Others in the lines of the palm, others in crystal balls. She read palms too, I think. Ocampo. Magish reads the future in a vacant building, opposite the charcoal yard where he lives. The 6 huge picture windows and the 12 little windows of the adjacent building are like cards for him. Magish never thought of associating windows and cards. That was my idea. His methods are mysterious and can be explained only in part. He tells me that during the day he has trouble drawing conclusions because the light disturbs the images. The most propitious moment to carry out his task is at sunset, when certain slanting rays of light filter through the side windows of the building and are reflected onto the glass of the windows in front. That is why he always makes appointments with his clients for that hour of the day. I know, having learned from careful research, that the upper part of the building has to do with matters of the heart, the lower part with money and work, and the middle with problems of family and health. Man, it almost has a Tarkovskian quality to it. I mean, this is about a young boy prophet who lives in a charcoal yard who tells people's fortunes by looking at this abandoned building with several floors of windows, wherein across from it, where he takes his clients, they can see their destiny, their future. Who comes up with this shit? Better Than Food, so who should read it? Well, of course, if you're into Borges and Casares, but also if you're into Cesar Aira and the recently deceased Mexican author Amparo Davila, who wrote a collection called The House Guest, rest in peace, of course. I definitely think you should check this out. And if you like Silvino Ocampo, please check out all the aforementioned. I'd say read Borges and Casares for the illusory mystical tragedy. Read Ocampo for the mysterious black magic cruelty. All right, coffee time. For those of you who are new, I take all the patrons on Patreon who have donated $5 or more to the show, and I place their names in this mason jar, and I pull out a name for every review I do. And whoever's name I pull out, I send them a hard copy of the book I'm reviewing, plus a bag of coffee roasted by yours truly. Except lately, for safety, I've been sending them coffee from local Portland roasters. I can't roast right now, and it just adds another layer of safety. Plus it helps support small businesses, which is cool. The coffee's good. Like, really good. So if you'd like to get in on that, you can head over to the description box below and click the link, or go to patreon.com/books-are-better-than-food and donate $5 or more per video. $1 or more will get you access to the patron-only reviews, the Discord channel, plus the Better Than Friday newsletter that I send out every Friday, which is just a list of 5 things that I'm interested in at any given time. Could be books in the pipeline, could be films, could be music, could be articles, changes week to week. So if you think we have similar taste, I think you'll get a lot of value out of those. And there's a whole backlog of like 30 something of them, so there's a lot of stuff to go through. Also, if you care to purchase a book, you can click the link for Amazon in the box below, and the channel gets a kickback from whatever you purchase using that link. Like, even if it isn't this book, if you just follow that link and buy socks, then I believe the channel will get a kickback. And so if you would like to support the show by buying socks or whatever, or more books, perfect. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much to all the patrons who have supported the show, and best of luck. All right, here we go. Evan. Thank you very much, Evan. Really appreciate it. You're going to receive Thus Were Their Faces, plus a bag of delicious coffee. All right, please subscribe if you haven't already, and please hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this. And always remember, bring a book wherever you go. And if you ever need something to read, please stop by. I'll be here putting out reviews. I'm not going anywhere. Thank you very much for watching. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Have a great night. Talk to you soon. Ciao.